good morning. We will just do a bit of an introduction. So my name is Alistair Gordon. I'm one of the principal consultants here at Expertunity, which is a subsidiary of HFL Leadership, and it's the subsidiary that focuses on working with experts to help them fulfill their potential. And I'm joined today by my colleague and also head of research for Expertunity, Darren Fox. And we're going to be taking you through some slides, we hope in about 25 minutes time overall, and then give you the opportunity to ask some questions, and also very much encourage you to make contributions in terms of this particular topic, which is the challenge really of identifying high potential experts. And we've developed an Expertunity talent model that helps people do this. So without further ado, I might kick on because there's some introductory slides that a few of the people who are attending today will have seen already. So what are we going to cover? We're going to cover three things really. The case for building expert capability, which, as many of you know, is a conversation we've been having with a lot of organizations here and in Asia and in the United Kingdom, and also now in the US. A lot of investment is made into developing leaders, and we're arguing that it's possibly the case now that some of that should be diverted into developing mission critical experts, and we'll be making the case briefly, and then we'll be getting really to the guts of the sort of questions that we have long conversations with most of our clients in this space, which is how do you identify the experts who are high potential, and therefore how do you identify the ones that are worth investing in? Because most organizations have lots of experts. It's absolutely not possible to invest in all of them. So what's the right selection procedure? How do you go about it? And this is a question that we're asked by a lot of clients, and we're going to share pretty much everything we know in the next 25 minutes about the challenges and some of our suggestions as to how our highest performing clients are doing it, which will be section 3. And as I say, myself and Darren will be hosting. So Darren, over to you to set us up.
Thanks, Alistair. So firstly, just discussing in terms of why we think looking at for high potential experts in parallel with looking for your high potential leaders is becoming increasingly important. And there's a number of trends, but the 4 that I really want to sort of focus on is the first one is this idea of that, well, things are just getting more complex. And the role of experts in the past in terms of the build of strategies and plans was, well, they'd provide the data, they'd provide the report, and then strategy was secret men's and women's business at the boardroom. Experts now have to move away from this idea of being service providers to actually being partners in that sort of ongoing strategic conversation in terms of how do we start tackling in organizations and in the community around increasingly complex issues and opportunities. Second key theme is that we're all aware that for those of us who rely on expertise, that it's getting harder and harder to find the top experts. We're just, in Australia, certainly we're not producing enough people within this with STEM skills to meet the demand, and globally as well. And there's recent research saying that there's a potential gap of $11.5 trillion as a result of that skills gap. So finding, growing, and developing your experts is becoming increasingly more important. Another area is this idea is just that there's just more and more data and knowledge out there, and new forms of knowledge are happening all the time in terms of the number of university degrees that you could get back when I went to university as compared to now is well, it was quite small in comparison back then. So, and the amount of the data that needs to be sort of assessed and understood is, I can't remember how much it's growing year on year. And then finally, this idea of hybrid models. So COVID has showed us that we don't need, experts are saying, well, if the value that I bring comes from my head, why do I need to come into your office? Why do I need to even be in your city? And so those organizations who are setting up those new hybrid models are the ones that are showing to actually sort of starting to be the most successful. All right, so you've probably seen some slides there that Alistair was foreshadowing. So we're going to hand over now to Alistair in terms of some further analysis of the why.
Yeah, so thank you, Darren. Sorry to mess your things up here. So
All
I
right.
just wanted to explore, why invest in expert talent from an individual perspective. So Darren's covered the sort of the global trends. This is a typical, I think, journey that our research has uncovered really for expert talent in a lot of organisations. They spend their first 5 or 10 years, and by technical experts, we mean they could be corporate lawyers, they could be in IT, they could be in risk, finance. It's a whole range of experts. Could be in science. Indeed, some high technical experts are in HR, for example, Roman Bang experts, or indeed those in organisational development. So most of these experts spend quite a bit of time acquiring their knowledge in the first 10 years. And then in the middle of the years, they're gathering more knowledge and probably keeping some currency. They're gathering a lot of experiences. But as you can see, we've defined 3 levels here: master, expert, and specialist level. And they tend to sort of flatline and really hit this sort of technical bubble that we tend to see. And the opportunity for organizations that we have identified, and indeed, most people in most large organizations we talk to about this who are thinking about their experts understand this option and opportunity a lot, which is how do you take experts to a higher level? And typically that is by adding enterprise skills, by which I mean business acumen, change, interpersonal skills, what you might call soft skills. In some instances, you're adding those enterprise skills to the technical skills that then, provide a much more holistic, well-rounded expert, an expert capable of being technically brilliant, but also connecting and collaborating brilliantly with non-technical stakeholders in their organizations. And this pretty much doubles the value of those experts to that organization, and very often significantly increases the ability of those experts to add value to that organization, be fulfilled, be retained, and fulfill their potential. So that's a typical. This orange piece here is really the growth opportunity for a lot of experts in your organisations. And I think I was talking to a client last night in the UK where they were saying, a lot of their experts are quite frustrated. They're at this sort of stage where the energized piece, where they flatlined for a period of time, and they need re-energizing. And once they do so, they can add all of that value. There are these other options as well in terms of what we're going to be focusing very much on this energize area, I think, in terms of how you identify talent in the expert space that has talent that's unfulfilled.
Okay, thanks, Alistair. Okay, so next thing in the part of the agenda was just, well, what gets in the way of us as organizations in terms of identifying our high potentials. Sorry, Alistair, you've just moved ahead there. And this comes from my own experience working in organizations for 20 years, predominantly in OD, but also the research that we've been doing at HFL as well. And I would break it down into sort of 3 key obstacles. It's the what, the who, and the how. So in terms of what it comes down to is this idea of potential for what. So as opposed to just identifying potential for managing more and more people, are there other areas of value that we can assess in terms of where experts can provide for their organizations? The next thing that sort of gets in the way is this, leaders, despite all previous rumors, they're human. And all the different biases and issues that get in the way of identifying future potential for leadership is even worse when it comes to trying to identify potential in areas that you don't truly probably understand as well. So leaders are the ones who are actually usually identifying experts who may have the potential, and they have all the same biases that they have as well. But this other thing in terms of what does the, success look like? So pop culture, the myths and legends of what is a leader, what does success look like, or, and dare I say, even what is a smart person? What is a, you know, this stereotypical sort of idea of nerd, and some of the difficulties that they may bring, all of that sort of gets in the way. And then finally, in the how is, if you leave this webinar with nothing else other than if you're using the 9-box grid, our biggest recommendation is stop using the 9-box grid. It's just too narrow and blunt of an instrument of trying to identify experts when you're also trying to identify high potential leaders. What also gets in the way, of course, is quite often they hit a REM ceiling, where experts have to make a decision in terms of, do I become a people leader to continue with income growth? Organizations often don't have a technical stream, a career stream as well, which is going to impact your ability in terms of, well, identify, I know I've got high potential experts, but how do I grow them and develop them into a career? So they don't have high potential differentiated programs. They identify high potential experts, and then they just move them into the high potential leadership program. And it just doesn't quite work for them. And there is an issue around diversity, inclusion, and culture that I'm going to actually talk about near the end as well. So Alistair, if you can move on to the next slide. So how do we, or what is our proposal in terms of how to deal with this? And so we've designed the Expertunity talent model, and there's 5 key steps, and we're going to go through each of these 5 steps in a bit more detail. So on the next slide, Alistair, in terms of the first step, is the first thing you need to do is define that population of who are the experts in the first place, right? What are they actually, who are they? Most organizations don't have in their database like a job family of experts, but you have to find some way of identifying. And so we've, over time, have built up a criteria that helps us define experts for the organizations that we work with. And I only want to sort of focus on maybe the first top 3. And the first one's the obvious one. They are the go-to people. That there's usually a lineup. They've got a ticket number, one of those ticket machines at their desk, in terms of people going to them with questions or asking for their help around problems. But the second level of that is that they're not just simply the go-to people who answer other people's questions. They're actually able to apply their knowledge and their expertise, this deep level of expertise that is clearly deeper than their stakeholders that they're supporting, to actually addressing real world problems, issues, and opportunities. And then the third thing is that because of that expertise, they are virtually granted the same sort of judgment, authority, and leadership because of that expertise by the people around them, right? So it's actually a form of leadership that is handed to them, either overtly or subtly, because of this expertise that they have in their head. Right, and then the other sort of 3 points. We're going to be sending out this deck as well for everybody, so you can read this in a bit more detail. Now I want to move on to the next slide, which is the next step. So once you've identified the experts, organizations need to, if you're not doing this already, is expand your definition of potential. So the potential for what, right? So yes, there may be some experts who are clearly showing the potential for people leadership, but they may have potential for other things. So what if those you have experts who are clearly showing the potential to introduce new innovations, if actually not disrupt your competitors with new ideas and new products or new ways of doing things? Experts who are showing that they have the ability and the potential to work on bigger projects, things with bigger scope, bigger impact, right? So not necessarily people leadership, potentially larger and larger projects. one of the key skills of the future that I found in my previous organization when we're looking at future capabilities out to 20, 30 years was those individuals who are able to nurture and facilitate collaboration across diverse groups of experts are going to be worth their weight in gold. And so those experts who can able to not just collaborate themselves, but actually nurture that in others, or is going to be a top skill of the future. Experts who are showing the ability to actually pass on their knowledge to others. So as experts, in their as they move into their mid-career or near the end of the career, those experts are actually showing the ability and desire to grow the next generation of experts. Can that actually be a role for them in terms of being that mentor? Another opportunity for experts is this idea of being a brand ambassador. Right, so those top experts, if you're putting them put them out there in terms of talking to the community, talking to professional associations and whatnot, and they can be an extension of your brand, and they will attract experts, other experts to your organization, because experts want to work with other masters and to be able to learn from them. And so ultimately, it's not just assigning potential for managing bigger groups of people. It's what is the potential for experts to increase value or to even protect value in a highly competitive, threatening situation. Okay. And so moving on to the next slide, Alistair, which handing over to you.
Yes, so I think it's important, we've got two groups of people on the webinar this morning and potentially listening through our website in the future. One would be a group of you who are, in organizational development and maybe learning and development. And another group of you are managers of these technical experts. And I'd say to the managers of the technical experts who are on the call, that you might actually need to do some of this work for your organization rather than leaving it to OD. Organizational development, particularly learning and development, tend to have a mandate to build leadership pipelines in their business. And the potential that Darren has just described for your technical experts to add lots more value in the future is very often not visible to the OD teams. It's usually very visible and needed by the managers of technical experts. So this may well be something where you're going to need to be proactive. And when we look at what, we've decided what potential for what, if we now sort of filter for potential, there are some processes that a typical organizational development team have for managing leadership talent inside the organization, and the sorts of signs and symbols that they look for to identify who's a high potential leader, that is to say, who can lead lots more people in the future in the organization. Those signs and symbols, and even to a point, their systems that they use for identifying talent don't work with experts. So you actually need a slightly different process. And if I just, direct you to the erroneous markers circle that's on this slide, some of the behaviors that may be visible of experts who have high potential actually might look the opposite. If they're getting feisty, if they're very passionate about what they do, if they're getting very frustrated, perhaps behaving not as we would like them to behave, maybe not living the values of your organization, maybe not even playing well with the other children, that in a leadership context of talent would all be perceived as negative and would all be perceived as something that would mean that they wouldn't, you would not identify those individuals in the talent pool. But they may be, in relation to experts, indicators that actually that person has a lot more to offer and they're incredibly frustrated they can't do so. And so, you have to think differently. What we've, done here is we've split the sort of indicators of potential, the signs and symbols of potential, if you like, into two areas. One is personal markers, and one is organizational markers. And this personal marker list really is heavily influenced by all of the research that Darren has done in the last 2 years around how do you spot people who, what are the aspects of experts that enable them to become master experts, those really high performing people that Darren was just describing on the other last slide. Passionate desire to advance their technical domain's impact on the organization, strong belief they can personally add more value. The best experts are ones who really want to learn all the time and remain current. And, you know, they may be overly attracted and distracted by really complex and difficult problems. Once they've mastered something, they want to master the next thing. You know, in software, we see this where instead of just using the same tools all the time, they want to use the new shiny tools as quickly as possible. That's an indicator that they're going to be able to add more value. And from an organizational marker, if they are a single point of value that Darren was describing earlier on, flight risk impact is very high. For most senior technical experts, the flight risk is not evident until suddenly it happens, and then most organizations find them intensely difficult to replace. And if any of you in OD aren't sure about that, just go and ask the technical heads, who are the mission critical people they would find most difficult to replace, and they won't be the people leaders in their organization, they'll be the technical experts. And also go and ask your talent team, your talent acquisition team, what are the 10 most difficult positions to fill in the last few years, and they'll give you a list of technical expert roles typically. So these are the sort of three areas that we suggest you use as filters for expert potential. And as we say, it's basically slightly different from how it's been done in the past. So that was my slide to make it more easier that I forgot that I had. And then we really get onto this piece around how do you then go on and develop them. And I guess we're not suggesting necessarily that you need to use an external supplier like us, or that you might want to leverage some of our assets. But what we are suggesting is that you'll need something different from your leadership capability framework to develop experts. And the logical answer is that you'll need, a capability framework for experts. And this one here, the expertship model, which a number of you on the call have already seen, helps experts understand that the journey to mastery of expertship is not just about more technical skills. It's about getting this balance of these relationship skills and these value domain skills along with the technical domain that helps them get there and leverage their knowledge, influence, and create more business value and impact. And the other thing that's very important about a capability framework is you need to delineate with your experts the difference between operating at expert level and master expert level. And the difference, there is a lot of people come on our programs who profile at the expert level, believing they're as expert as they can be. And when you open up the opportunities for them to have more impact at master expert level, they tend to respond very positively in terms of wanting to develop those extra skills. Back to you, Darren.
Great. Okay. So what might a differentiated expert high potential program look like? And arguably, it doesn't necessarily have to be about the high potentials. This is how much you better improve your experts. And so this is based on our experience and also research I've done with clients, research I'm doing for a book, but also external research in terms of people who research this stuff. And one of the things that I found both personally but also what the external research says is one of the most powerful things that can really lead to development has proven over and over again to be coaching and mentoring. So quite often experts aren't given a coach, but executive coaching actually has big benefits. And also this idea of what the external research says is this whole idea of almost like this master apprenticeship style of mentoring is one of the most effective ways to develop your experts. And personally, just from my perspective, since joining HFL 2 years ago, some of my most rewarding experiences have been working with experts one-on-one and helping them to realize that they actually have a voice, and giving them the confidence to have that voice around sharing their opinions and their beliefs and their knowledge at a very senior level, because quite often they don't have that. And to get them over to that point and to see them do that and achieve that through the coaching relationship has been incredibly rewarding. In terms of programs, is how many organizations create databases or ways, how do I make this expert more visible, so that, and it could be just something as simple as almost like an internal LinkedIn, where people can be searched. How can I get help on, this particular field, or whatever it is another thing is around qualifications. Experts love qualifications and certifications and degrees. So how can you support them in order to get that? And what that does, it also externally benchmarks them in many ways. We've also learned, like what Alistair was talking about, within that sort of expertship model, there's a big focus on social skills, interpersonal skills, relationship management, and commercial acumen, strategic thinking. What is the role, what are the strengths that experts can play within that, without actually, which is a bit different from how a leader plays in those spaces. In terms of creating experiences for experts, another piece of external research that's been done over the last 30 years is this idea of mobility. How can you move your experts around often? And because experts, by their nature and by the work that they do and their expertise, they can be siloed very quickly and very easily. And to be honest, a lot of experts start feeling comfortable within their silos. So how do we actually move them around the organization, working on different issues and opportunities of different parts of the business, applying their knowledge to those different areas of the business. I've talked about before the importance with growing complexity, one of the top skills of the future is to be able to facilitate collaboration around diverse groups of experts. To be able to bring your experts together, develop those collaboration skills, moving experts out of sort of this service provider of reports and data into the leadership team around strategy, actually getting them involved in participating in the development of strategy in real time. Networking, similar to the issue around silos, is giving them the skills and the opportunities to network both internally but outside the organization as well. Talked about this opportunity about being brand ambassadors, about their ability to attract your real masters, to be able to attract experts as a way to try to address this supply and demand issue that we have with STEM. And a lot of other organizations I've spoken to have things like hack days for their experts as well. So not just IT, but allowing their experts to just research or work on whatever they want, whether it's a 1 day or a half day a week, is to pursue their own personal research interests and to expand their own domain of expertise. And then finally, in terms of the how, workplace. So one of the key issues that is one of the hardest to address, and I know this from working in corporates for 20 years, is it's tricky to deal with that REM piece. And I know it's hard, but some organizations have done it, and some of the organizations I've researched have their top experts can be paid in terms of, and they have a career stream that lines them up at the same level as a managing director, managing an entire business unit. They can have individual experts because of the scope of and the impact that they can have and the value that they can bring. They're being paid accordingly in the same way as a managing director might. And one of the surprise, so I've always sort of felt that this is a D&I issue as much as anything else. So experts with their different ways of working, different ways of thinking, to actually include that in terms of a bit more sort of understanding and tolerance in terms of, sometimes, they might rub us the wrong way in terms of how they think or how they speak, but to actually be more accepting of, because of their strengths, let's leverage that, and how do we actually compensate for some of the downside. But one of the big surprises that I did get out from the organizations who are actually putting this entire holistic solution in place is they have said that this is much of a culture issue, a culture change issue, as much as anything else, in terms of how do you actually culturally bring experts into that sort of partnership around strategy. How do you include it within your D&I strategy? How do you move them out of the silos and into the back rooms and into working on the front line and with your leaders? They talk about it's a culture change issue as well. And then on the next slide is finally, what does a master expert look like, right? So what are you trying to build them towards? And so Alice has already talked about some of these things, but I'm not going to go through each of these one by one. But probably the thing that we have found that really sort of differentiates a master, or even the potential for master, and what the external research shows as well, is it's in the aspiration box. So masters, or the top experts, are passionate about their domain, and they believe that their domain of expertise can change the world. And I've seen this in, working in HR and OD, talking to CIOs, CFOs, whatnot, heads of research. They all say that they want to get their people at the leadership table, at the strategy table, because they believe they can make such a big difference playing in that space. And they have to have that passion, because you cannot become an expert and put in the effort that is required to be a master in your field without being passionate about it. So you're going to care about it, and you're going to come across as passionate and probably a bit more sort of assertive. So it's that aspiration, this sense of mission that they often have. Another key thing in the aspiration I want to explore is that the top experts are people who want to not just progress in their field of expertise, but they want to progress that field. They want to grow that domain of knowledge for everybody and its importance. They also actually do have a desire to mentor other people. They love passing on their knowledge. They're clearly not those hoarders. And the other one is just, I think Alice has already talked about, is this idea of that in terms of their ambition, their ambition is not around climbing the traditional corporate ladder. It's around taking on harder and harder, more complex, more difficult, bigger impact issues and opportunities. That's where that ambition lies. If it happens to have to require leading people, well, so be it, but their core ambition is around this piece, around doing harder and harder, more difficult challenges. All right. Anything that you would add to that or focus on before we move on to the next slide, Alistair?
No, other than everything in the X Factor for Experts box, Darren, which is in the darker green, can be learned. We're not anticipating that you'll see experts who can do all of those X Factor things, although you probably will see, if you talk to them, the aspiration that Darren has just described. But all of the things in the green box can be learned very quickly by very smart experts, and their ability to master these skills is remarkable. And one of the reasons that they haven't acquired these skills so far is that some of them haven't realized that these skills are a real requirement for them to actually achieve the aspirations in the box above, if that makes sense. Okay. So summary. I think this is was going to be Darren's, but I'm going to run through it very quickly because we're running slightly late and I want to give people an opportunity for questions. So define what we mean by experts, define what potential for what, develop criteria to identify hypos, and then grow the potential. I might make the comment that Darren described the workplace pieces like career ladders, remuneration, those sorts of things, and he described them as difficult. And I think we all agree with that. So it's quite a significant different way of thinking. lots of people ask us the question, where should we start in this enterprise? Should we start with the workplace settings and get all those sorted out? Or should we start with identifying and growing the experts? And our answer always is start with the latter. And the reason we suggest that is that when the senior leaders in the business see what a small investment in your experts, the difference in value that creates, suddenly they're interested in retaining those experts to a massively more higher degree. And that then creates the burning platform to talk about those career planning and remuneration issues. So, if it's which comes first, the chicken or the egg, in this case, it's definitely, we think, the growth to potential. So we might stop there and ask for comments and questions.